Hello and welcome to Setting the Stage, episode 75, Masks, Capitalism, and Coming of Age, Joel and Critical Bits. In this episode, we interviewed Joel about his actual play Critical Bits, which is a superhero campaign using the mask system made by Powered by the Apocalypse. So, check it out. A few ads for people before we get into the show. And you can also subscribe to our Patreon if you don't like those and not have to listen to them and get episodes a week early.
I'm here today with Joel from the Critical Bits Actual Play podcast. Hi, Joel.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. I definitely know what time zones are and how to do that math.
Right. Yeah. So you're on the East Coast, right? And I'm on the West Coast?
Yeah.
So usually we want to figure out who I'm talking to beyond the RPG experience. So who are you outside of RPGs?
So I'm based in Atlanta. I do a lot of freelance video work and editing. Before I actually started Critical Bits, I'd never done any actual plays. I did a lot of film sketches, like comedy sketches and stuff like that. Always been an avid role play fan. I've done a lot of TTRPGs. Off camera and off mic, and then I always like to have a project going at one point or another, and so I finished up a run of a 3-year-long stand-up comedy and film sketch show where we did like a monthly show here in Atlanta called Ladies Night, and then I was just trying to think of what to do next, and this was years ago, and I believe around the time that we were starting, Taz, the Adventure Zone, their first arc, Balance, was like wrapping up, and I was a big McElroy Brothers fan, listened to all of Balance as it was coming out, and I was like, I think this is the next project I want to do, is like an actual play. Yeah, and then just kind of went from there. We finished Critical Bits a couple of years ago. We have another show called Oddity Roadshow that's about to wrap up recording, and the finale will probably end at the end of 2026. And then we're working on our next big project. And then I have like a small little side project called The Astonishing Adventures SS Batship, which is a really silly actual play that is just kind of like thrown together. So yeah, didn't have anything to do with the space before Critical Bits, and now I'm fully immersed in it. And I actually like have a studio and like a recording studio in Atlanta that, I run all my shows out of, and been trying to help people put on other actual plays, whether it be filmed or audio only.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. You said the Oddity Roadshow is like you're finishing filming around now, or you're going to finish releasing the episodes in like a year?
So we have the one thing I learned from Critical Bits, backlog is your best friend. So we do, as with a lot of actual plays, we do like a every other week release. So we try to stay about 6 to 8 episodes ahead of our release schedule of the recordings. So, I mean, that right there is like 2 to 3 months. We have 2 more arcs, which will probably be about anywhere from 10 to 15 episodes. So we'll record those in the next probably like 6 months, but they probably won't come out fully until the end of 2026.
Yeah. I mean, I knew there was like a bit of a delay between release and recording, but wow, that's much longer than I thought it would be.
I mean, with Critical Bits, actually, we didn't really have a big backlog. I didn't really, it was my first actual play. So we had 2 episodes done, and I was like, well, let's release it and see what people think. So we were usually like 2 or 3 episodes ahead. We record in person for all of my shows because all my shows are very comedic based. So like the improv and in-person feel really helps.
Yeah,
over COVID, we sadly had to go remote for a good while of Critical Bits, and then we had like an 8 episode, maybe more, maybe less backlog, and then it was like, hey, we can all get vaccinated and get our shots and wait, and I was like, hey, we can either keep recording remotely like none of us want to, or we can burn our entire backlog and be like 1 or 2 episodes against the wire with it, but we can go back to in person, and we all agreed in person was the way to go. So, luckily there's not been another global pandemic, just the same one. But so with Oddity Roadshow, we're like, okay, we want to build in more of a backlog, and I'm friends with Branson Reese, and a lot of the people from Rude Tales of Magic and These Stars of Space, and they were telling me about their backlog. and they have about a 10 or 12 episode backlog when they first started. So I definitely want to like give that buffer for both my editing time. Also, we can make sure we're really editing the episodes as best as they can be, any notes that we need to change, and then that way I really have a good control of the narrative of the story. But it is wild though, because we have a fan Discord, and I'll like, man, I won't give spoilers. I'm like, oh man, we just had a cool session, and then people are like, so when's it come out? I'm like 10 months from now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, but Critical Bits though was the first one that I really cut my teeth on, and I loved it. It was a lot of fun. Learned a lot about just making the show, and was really proud to fully wrap it up with I think it was like the total like 94 episodes with a bunch of bonus episodes.
Yeah. How did you find the group of people that you recorded, the players?
Yeah, so the first player actually is a longtime friend of mine, Shannon Strucci. I had mentioned I used to do a stand-up and sketch show. Shannon was actually a contributor to the show. We would have a submission block at the end of every show. It was monthly, so people could submit sketches to play there. If you won, you got bragging rights and came back next week. Shannon had submitted some sketches. We became friends through the sketch show, and then started hanging out. I knew they did tabletop stuff, and I actually was hosting a brunch at my house because I love to host brunches, and was just like, hey, I want to pitch you an idea. I know you do, tabletop stuff. I really want to start a show. I have a couple ideas, but I would love if you wanted to be involved as one of the first players, and we can find a cast together. We actually we asked like 2 or 3 more people, and then they were like, well, I'm interested, but I can't commit the time. And then Shelby Lee came on through Shannon. Shelby's like a longtime friend of Shannon's. They went to college together. And then Paul Byron, I knew from stand up, and somebody that we had actually asked that they said yes, and then later had to turn us down, was like, oh, you should ask Paul as well, because they were a little closer to Paul than I was, but I still knew Paul through stand up. And we literally, Shannon and Shelby had played together, but no one else had played together at the table and any kind of connection. And so we had a couple of session zeros, like talking over stuff. And then our idea was like, okay, cool. Let's record 2 episodes. We'll send them out to friends. If we like them, we'll put it out. If we want to change things, if the flow isn't there, or we just hate this group, we can go from there. And it clicked almost immediately. The very first episode that everyone's hearing is the very first time any of us were like role playing together as a group. And we had talked about, like the tone of stuff that we want to do, and like some of the stories we wanted to tackle. But it was a very organic fit from the beginning. And the show has kind of evolved really on its own with like a lot of the storylines and tropes, especially because like my GM style is very improvisational. So I love just to let players kind of act like they're in a sandbox for a little bit, see how they engage with the world, see how they react, and then kind of let that inform like, oh, so this is something that I could do for their character that they would like, or push against them. So yeah, like everyone lived in Atlanta because, I was once again just like, hey, I have some equipment from my day job of being a freelance videographer. So, we can record this, but I want it to be in person because that's in my opinion, the best kind of table there is if you can have people like actually physically there with you. So yeah, and that started from there. And it flowed really well. And, we would talk about storylines we're doing off mic and how we want things to build. And, sometimes if I had like a fun surprise for one of the players, I would tell them and be like, hey, this is going to happen in like 2 episodes. Are you cool with it? Great. I'm not telling the other players because I want it to be like a big reveal. We did that with a bunch of stuff in Critical Bits, actually, where the person playing the player character got to know like a big surprise of their character, and to A, make sure they were cool with it, and B, to then have the fun of the big reveal. We did that a lot, and I think it really works well with like the superhero tropes too.
Yeah, I mean that also kind of makes sense with how like some like movies are structured, where like you'll, as an actor, you'll figure out what your part is going to be, so you know how to like have the emotions for it, but other people might not get the script for that part.
Yeah.
So that their reactions can be almost more genuine for what is happening in the scene.
Yeah, and it always played really well. And then I guess we didn't say this yet. We used the Powered by the Apocalypse mask system from Magpie Games. And so that is like literally just about like teenage superheroes. So very dramatic, very over the top. We made a rule in the beginning of like, hey, these are all teen characters. We're not gonna do romantic storylines. We're not doing sexualization storylines, and we were very clear to our fans. We're like, hey, all the characters and most NPCs are under 18, so no. I think if I remember correctly, I think Shannon's character might have been 17 or 18, because they were playing the playbook The Reform, so they're like an ex-villain. So
Right.
they're a little older, they're in the world, but like we just made a very clear rule of not doing that. We still had like, one of the characters was asexual, one of them was a lesbian, but we just were like, yeah, we're not doing romantic storylines, but everything else was really on the table. We got into a lot of good sins of the father, past storylines of like, because I think it's so ripe with superhero stuff of like, oh yeah, like it's actually, a lot of the stuff that's happening is connected to your parents and their generation and et cetera, et cetera.
Uh-huh.
So it was really fun to just be able to delve in and do that. And, I never knew. I had some ideas of what I wanted the story to go. I didn't have like the grand scale plan of anything. I put in a couple of things that I was like, oh, this will grow to be larger later. But I was really just open to see like how they responded to the world. And so, yeah, it just, like I said, a lot of it was just very organic, and then having some meetings here and there just about like, how do we like the story? Very similar to like a larger scale of, if you've heard of the stars and wishes system of like just highlighting stuff that you like that you've done, the GM and the other players, and then your wishes of like, I would love to see this come to fruition.
Yeah, and I feel like Masks is just a really good system for that. Like any of the Powered by the Apocalypse systems really encourage that kind of approach to the story structure.
Yeah, very, very like rule of cool. Yes, and I mean, with Powered by the Apocalypse, failing is how you get experience points. And if anyone's like a writer or a script writer or just a fan of that's how stories move forward. So I think it's a really good one. And we even got to play around with like playbook changes with like how, as the characters advanced, which I thought was a very fun thing to do, because that happens so much in like someone tragically dies but they're not dead and they come back as like a new superhero or a new name, and so just a lot of fun stuff
Right.
like that. And the current game we run, Oddity Roadshow, is using Monster of the Week, which is also powered by the Apocalypse. So I'm just a really big fan. I played a lot of D20 systems, mainly D&D growing up. But I don't want to deal with all the crunch and also be telling a story.
Yeah, I feel like those systems you have to do a lot more work in the editing room to make them
Yeah.
work for a show, because like a lot of that stuff can be fun to play, but isn't necessarily fun to like listen to or watch. This has been my experience.
And it's so funny too, because I thought the majority of people thought that too. And then we had some people be like, "Oh, I wish you guys wouldn't cut out the rules talk, and I want it to be more crunchy." But I was like, no, that's not for us. And every show's different, and just make the show you want.
Yeah, of
We
course.
had a patron once just be like, "Hey, you guys don't follow the rules enough. I'm gonna stop subscribing to you." I was like, "Cool." And they're like, "Oh, really? You're not going to change it? I told you I was going to stop giving you $5 a month." No, that's your right. Like, I hear you. That's not the show we want to make. Thank you for your support. Goodbye. And so it's just like such a weird thing.
Yeah, it's also like you change it, but then there's going to be a bunch of other people that don't like that change because they like what you're doing now. That's like why they
Yeah.
subscribed in the first place.
And I think that's the big thing. I think that's why streamers and podcasters, the landscape of TV and movies is so awful right now. You're beholden to these giant studios, these archaic structures where it's so hard to even break in. And it's kind of been the same way, like, early days of YouTube, whenever it's like, oh, we can make stuff and we can have access to audiences and we don't have to do that. I think that's like the biggest thing that you got to stay true to, is if you're really doing independent storytelling and you want to stick with it, we make some money off of Patreon. A lot of it goes back into our studio that I'm trying to build up. But honestly, like at the end of the day, the great thing about not having a giant sponsor or corporate overhead. Is we get to tell the story we want at the table. And so that's the saying. Like somebody can say, "Hey, I don't like this." I'm like, "Cool, you can leave." If everybody on our Patreon says we hate the new story you're doing, switch it. I'll listen because that's that's
Yeah, if
more
your
than
whole entire audience says something, of course.
but yeah, so I think it's just really important, and it's just one of those things of like I think a lot of people starting new projects and new shows of any sort, or you're always trying to like look at what other shows did, and like how they're successful and what stories they told, and wherever you can get inspiration from. I think that's a huge thing, but like it's such a daunting task to try to be like, okay, well, Critical Role did this, so let's do what Critical Role did. No one's ever doing Critical Role again. No one's ever doing D20 again. Like I watch D20. I'm not as big of a fan of Critical Role, but I respect them, and they've been around forever, and they've cornered a market. But like we're never getting that level again, like organically. And so you
Right.
just gotta
Yeah.
make what you want to make, especially with these games. Tabletop is such a not just open way of storytelling. It's a group storytelling game. Like it also depends on the GM. Some can be more heavy-handed. Some can be, I know some shows where they have, kind of plotted out with the players like, hey, this is the whole arc of this season. This is what we're doing on these episodes. You get to ad lib a little bit, but like this is where I need you to be. But they're still doing it as a group. So I just think it's such a unique kind of thing that you get to do of like building a world and a story together with your players at the table and letting them have a lot of effect on it, or their choices being like, oh wow, like I would have never in a million years thought you're going to do that. And instead of like, I've had players and the show's be like, oh well, I can redo it if it doesn't work with what you had planned. I want, no, it does. No, don't redo it. Like it ruined everything I had planned and I love it. Let's go with this. Like,
Yeah. I mean, even outside of like doing this as a show, that's kind of what role playing is in general for role playing games.
yeah, and that's why I've loved it for years. I'm 38 now, and I started playing D&D, like advanced D&D, when I was like 9.
Wow.
So I have I think my tabletop career can legally drink.
That's pretty cool. No, yeah, I did want to ask about what your experiences were outside of Powered by the Apocalypse games. It sounds like you've been playing for a long time, obviously. You've done, I'm guessing, a couple editions of D&D.
Yeah, we started. I think the bulk would probably be 3 and 3.5. I've played some 5e in the last couple of years. A lot of D&D growing up. Did some White Wolf games. Didn't really get as into those because, like, as like a preteen teenager, I just didn't want to do politics role play.
Right.
And then it wasn't actually until a little bit before I decided I wanted to start a podcast that I had played the actual Apocalypse World system that Powered by the
original.
Yeah.
Right.
I played that in a home game with some friends. I was a weird cultist who used sex magic, and so I just was like this old man that just walked around mostly nude the whole time. And it was just such a fun system because like I would just be like, I want to do this, and then my GM was like, cool, just roll this one stat, and just it was just like very build as you go. And so I really enjoyed that, and then I started looking into other Powered by the Apocalypse systems because I liked that one so much. And then that's when I found Masks, and that was like one of my picks. But I ran like a 6-month campaign with some other friends of Masks, just a home game to be like, hey, let me see if this is the show I want to make and the game I want to use. And I loved it. I think it's just so fun. And like I said, just kind of exploring early days like teen superheroes, very dramatic, very fun. And we were a lot more bloody than the game kind of tells you to be, but also that's the other great thing about role playing games. You can scale up or scale down, whatever you want to do.
Yeah. And yeah, I think Masks is really one of the best superhero systems out there because it's more focused on like the emotions and narrative, which I feel like is really what a lot of superhero stories are about, really. Like it's not really like a numbers game for like the Hulk is so strong or something like that. That's usually not what the stories are really about.
Well, I mean, yeah, because like when especially for like superhero stuff, but anything really, like because I have like a background in like writing, sketches and I've done some scripts and stuff like that. There was like a period that we were trying to sell this pilot that I'm happy that never went to air because it was just a bad idea. But like I got to go in a lot of rooms with big names. That was really cool, and we got notes that were like, "Hey, your show is really funny, but the characters like we're not like I don't give two shits about these characters. They're just funny people. I don't know why I would watch this every week." And it really like honed in of like the characters matter. It's like characters first, story second, because you have to have compelling characters to make a good story good, because you want to follow these people. And so that's kind of with like superhero stuff of like you're saying, like it's not a numbers game, because every time you level up, there's always a stronger villain out there. And the thing that like you see Tony Stark struggling with isn't, ooh, I didn't get enough boosters or enough guns on my suit. It's like, oh no, I have PTSD. I am struggling because I think I'm a failure. And like the battle with the Hulk and Bruce Banner, Hulk's strongest person ever, but inside of him is like this scared man who's like trying to fight for his sanity. It's always stuff like that, and that's really
Yeah.
I think why, even though there's the superhero fatigue of movies, I think superhero genre is always going to stick around, because it's not about big flashy powers. It's about internal struggles, and then seeing them at a scale of these are godlike characters and they're still struggling with the same everyday hangups and problems that we are. And that's really what I think rings true about it.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's why Spider-Man was such a successful comic and still is because it's like a lot of the other superheroes are adults, and Spider-Man is more about like a typical human experience for like that emotional stuff.
Yeah, it just really, yeah, because it helps you kind of see, and he's like you're saying, like he's young, he's newer to the world, so he's still idealistic, and that's why a lot of times you see in movies and TV and like comics and stuff, like the grizzled characters are like the sidekick a lot of times, because they're working with a new plucky person who's like, oh, everything's fine, and the grizzled old broken down characters are like there to help them learn, support, but eventually be changed back to like having some hope, because it's really hard to follow narratives where like there's no like hope or joy,
Right.
especially
Yeah.
if you're fighting these forces of evil. And like a running gag that I didn't realize at first, but I still like, they would bring up, they're like, man, you have made so many villain NPCs and there's like 10 good guy NPCs. And I was like, yeah, that's what my view of the world is that there's a lot more people that are actively fighting against it, and there's a lot less people fighting for good, but good's still gonna win. And there's a lot of people out there, but it's just one of those things of like, yeah, like villains come and go because they're easily defeated. There's only a few heroes because it's hard to want to do and it's hard to stick around. And it shows that it's harder to make a choice to do good and fight for other people than it is to fight for yourselves and be selfish and like kind of go into that. And so that's kind of, some of the things we played with. And like I said, we had a lot of family trauma storylines. We had a lot of storylines about like them growing in power and like where their place in the world is. And it was not to give away the ending, but like I was toiling with the ending a lot because I was like, man, what do I want to do? How do we wrap this up? I don't want to just do like a full wipe, but like the ending kind of allows them to live lives outside of being superheroes. Like that's the easiest spoiler-free way to put it, is that they realize, hey, you did your job, you did your work, you can move on. Which I think is like such a hard thing to land, and a lot of like endings are really hard. I'm not saying we killed it, but like it's just that allowance of, hey, you can stop now. You did the work. Let the next generation take it.
Yeah. I feel like that's actually something that a lot of superhero comics suffer from is that they never really end. But in
Yeah.
order to keep telling the stories, they kind of have to reset everything. So like
Yeah.
Spider-Man has had several resets where it's just like, and everything goes back to normal again. Like the one more day plot line being one that was frustrating for myself and a lot of other people.
Yeah, well, it's also, yeah, because especially with those been around so long, like you're saying, like new storylines, and then we're like, oh, it's a different dimension and things like that. And, it's nice just to have it's nice to have an end to things. I think so much, especially TV, is ruined because they're just like, oh, people love this. We gotta keep putting this out. We gotta keep going. And you're like, no, end it, and then just go write another show. like Dexter, I loved the TV show Dexter. They wanted to end at season 4, and season 4 was a perfect ending for that story. And they have now they beat the show to death when it was the original Dexter, and they've done like 3 spin-offs, which like stop it. But that's a problem with just Hollywood in general right now.
Yeah, I feel like Buffy did that well, where it ended at about the right time. Like it was a good ending. And if people wanted more, there were the comics, but like it was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's good. And also kind of even on that note we're talking about, it is nice to like let things end, and if people want more, because then it is like a new generation of writers writing a different storyline with the characters. So I think that stuff like that can work out well, where it's like, hey, listen, we love that storyline, but we still just want to make Spider-Man comics. So this is a whole new take on them. We're just starting from square one, and some of that stuff works great. But yeah, I do think, especially for it's hard without like a writer's room in a studio to be like, cool, how do we want to wrap this up? What do we want to do? And I think especially for Critical Bits, and we're doing the same thing for Audio Roadshow, like I don't try to keep people fully in the dark, but I like to have surprises, and I'll tell people a little bit of things that they need to know. But for whenever like working on the endings, I just go to the players. I'm like, hey, what do you want to have happen that hasn't happened yet? What are hard no's? Who can I not kill NPC wise? And how is a way you want your character to end up? These are the things that I'm thinking about how to end the show with, and I want you all to like, because I want everyone to have input on that. And I trust my cast to still have like an organic flow and not just be like, well, I know I have to say this to do this, but just be like, hey, this is where it's going to end up at. Are we all cool with that? Because this is the end of a 3+ year long campaign that we've been running together, and players have as much say in where it goes and how it ends.
Yeah, I've done the same thing for my campaigns. When you're ending, it feels like that's the right time for like the GM has so much narrative control to give it over to the players, and like what would be satisfying for you, and then just do that.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things I wanted to ask before we got more into like talking about the actual show was why did you pick Critical Bits as the name for it? Like it didn't seem to have much connection to the show beyond.
Okay. Yeah. What our original plan was get an evergreen tabletop name because we were going to do more campaigns under Critical Bits. And I'll say this to everyone: don't put critical in your title. Don't put 20 in your title. Don't. We didn't realize how horrible the SEO was. So the original plan was like do the superhero, this saga, then put out a new thing under Critical Bits. So it was like Critical Bits because all of our stuff was gonna be very funny based, comedic based, like the bits.
Yeah.
I think the other name we were bouncing around was Head Dice. Like it's our ideas in the heads, but it sounded too much like headlights. But what happened was Shelby Lee, who plays Alex in the show, we hadn't started on the new show at all, but I was like, hey, this is the next campaign I want to run. Let's talk about ideas, et cetera, et cetera. And then Shelby eventually was just like, hey, I've been trying to think if I want to do this or not, but like I don't want to do the show anymore. Nothing against us. She was the only one that didn't have any kind of like creative or entertainment background.
Mm-hmm.
And so she was like, I love making the show. I hate having to schedule this. I hate having to do this. And I was like, cool. Are you cool to finish like this show? And she was like, yeah, I'll finish it. I just don't want to move on. Which I was like, cool, thanks. You told me in enough time. So then we pivoted. And then that's what we're trying to think of, because we're only a 4-person cast. Changing one person in any cast, let alone something that's small, the whole dynamics will be different, and then it's a different actual like voice that they're hearing, since we're audio only, not video. And so we were trying to debate, okay, well then do we start a new campaign under this? But then because I was thinking, I was like, okay, well then we start a new campaign, say, hey, one of the voices is different, it's a whole new person. Also, it's a new show with a new person, so the dynamics and the flow is gonna be different. And then also telling people, listen to my new campaign. It starts at episode 95 on this long list of episodes, and that just sounds daunting. So that's when we decided I'm gonna start a whole new campaign, like a whole new show feed, whole new like different thing. where it's just like, hey, this is its own fresh thing. So like, Oddity Roadshow is Oddity Roadshow. If I would have known that going back, I would have probably, because eventually they call themselves the Fun Bunch. I probably would have called it like the Fun Bunch Adventures or something silly like that. But we thought we were going to keep Critical Bits as a name for the long term to have other campaigns. But I personally really like starting a new show on a brand new feed because like some people are like, well, what about your old listeners? I was like, well, they're here that I say on the end of every episode towards the end. This is our new show. Check it out. But it really makes it easier for new people to find you, and it's less daunting to go to a new show and check out. And then vice versa, people that have heard Audio Roadshow, well, they're like, hey, I caught up on everything. I'm like, cool. Here's an entire show that we finished called Critical Bits. Go listen to that now. So it really hasn't affected us too bad. But that's why the name is very disconnected from the actual show itself, because we were going to use that as kind of like an all-encompassing, like, oh, we'll do like tabletop streams, and we'll do other.
Okay, it's like a brand name, sort
like
of.
a brand name.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of, and then now my actual studio and network is called Do You Validate, which is, it's just about getting validation through creating. So that's where the disconnect is. And so whatever the next show is, we haven't named it yet, but we are working on it. Like that will also have its own podcast feed, and like set a like standalone name.
All right, yeah, that makes sense. Well, yeah, let's talk about the show. So you're using the masks powered by the Apocalypse system, which is a lot like other powered by the Apocalypse systems. You got stats, you roll 2d6, you add your stat to it, and then it's 7 to 9 is a mixed success. We have like some sort of cost. 10 is a full success. 10 or higher, I should say. So I think I'm familiar with that. Most of the audience is familiar with the type of system. What makes the system different than other powered by the Apocalypse systems?
It's just the focus of it being the teen superheroes. A lot of Powered by Apocalypse use the similar system. They do have a rule where they have this thing called influence, and also their like powers, like the abilities, the attributes, like they shift. Because like sometimes you're like you'll like, oh, well, I'm not as like headstrong anymore. So like your danger stat will go down and your superior stat will go up, which is kind of like intelligence. And then there's influence, which we didn't use ever, and we got made fun of for it. But
Yeah.
like I do think the influence mechanic is really good, because the way it goes is like you get influence over other NPCs, other PCs, and then like adults have influence all over. So it's supposed to be that really like tugging, nagging thing of like, you have to do something for like the people around you. We kind of found it wasn't necessary to use influence as much, because it was like a stat that we didn't want to have to track all the time. And we're doing a really good job with kind of using the role play mechanic that it's supposed to represent already. Like people felt really indebted to their friends. People were terrified of the older like superheroes and supervillains. And so it just flowed really naturally for us. But I just think like the setting of just like, bright-eyed young teens, and especially the dynamic we had. So we had, for playbooks to start, we had the delinquent played by Paul Byron, who's named Jerry. And he intentionally made his character, his name is, the superhero name was Sad Sack, and it was a guy with a paper bag with a frowny face drawn on it, because he was like, that's the easiest thing for people to draw for fan art, and he was not lying.
Yeah.
But he could nullify powers. And so he was just kind of like, a burnout teen who could turn off people's powers. So he just shit talk everybody. And then we had the Beacon, which is a character that doesn't have superpowers and is just like a bouncy ball of light. So the Shelby Lee played Alex the Beacon, straight A student, track star, just overachiever, ADHD out the wazoo. Just like super happy, everything's great. And then Shannon played Kim, the the Reformed, which is like
Right.
an ex-villain like turned hero. And so like that dynamic was so fun to play with. And like I think that's what's really good about Mask and a lot of Powered by Apocalypse, but Mask in particular, is the playbooks aren't just the class, it's like the archetype and like the tropes that you get to play with. So just like, having a burnout, having a super bright-eyed, everything's awesome, Lego movie person, and then like an ex-villain who's like, oh, I know what the seedy underbelly of this city is. It's awful. You guys think you're fighting to save something, and it's actually corrupt to its core. And so I think that's really what struck out for us, struck me, is getting to have all those built-in like tropes and stuff to play with. So it was really easy to jump off with these characters without a lot of like backstory to build on.
The Beacon was the one that was the most confusing to me as a character, because I got the other concepts pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Where it's not exactly like, when I think of like superhero without powers, I usually think of Batman.
Yeah.
But this felt more like a sidekick for the intended application of it.
We definitely did like more sidekicky because that we said like kind of the backstory was that it's a world of superheroes and supervillains, so I'm sure plenty of people want to do that. So the backstory was like Alex just liked helping and doing good, and is a track star, and so it's like good at like being quick and athletic, but like not really great at fighting or other things. So she just like decided, I'm gonna go try to stop crime, and then and then her best friend growing up, Jerry, who's like the neighbor kid, was like, hey, that's insane, stop doing this. You know what, I'm gonna have to help you because you're gonna die otherwise. And so it was just, but I definitely want more sidekicky, just like why are you doing this, and a lot of jokes of like, hey, why is she here, like and then there's some like she changes playbooks, she gets powers eventually. Yeah.
Yeah, so those are the three main characters that kind of meet up, and it felt like the initial part of the show, you were just kind of like feeling out what the characters were and what you wanted to do, which I think is pretty typical for like the intended playstyle of Powered by the Apocalypse systems, where you don't necessarily have to have a direction for what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Did you have a like larger campaign idea at the start, or was it more like what I just said?
Yeah, I had the very basis. I just kind of told like the info that they get at the beginning is both of them, like the two of them were investigating because a bunch of kids have gone missing. They don't know where they are, but they're all super powered and it's alarming. And then the person they're trying to get the info from, Kim, Shan's character Kim, was like hired to protect him, and then one being told like, hey, the guy you're working for is like stealing kids, what's up with this? She kind of decides, okay, well, this is pretty fucked, I gotta turn sides. I had a really basic idea of like they were stealing superpowers from teens and repurposing them. And I knew I wanted to introduce these things called the friendship pegs, which were eventually turned into our affinity stones for like way down the road. So I had some like really broad ideas of what I knew the story was going to. I knew who the big bad of the first two seasons was and his like why he wanted to do it, but that was it. Because then I just was, like I said earlier, like I really wanted to see what attracted them, like what made them go, because like I was ready to do a full, you guys are in school, Kim has to like come in as this like new student, and you guys are like dealing with teachers who are all villains in this. And then two of the characters just kept being like, I'm not going to school, I'm ditching. Why would I go to the school? And so like I could never get them to go to school, so I was like, great, I'm scrapping that. Let's pivot and do something else. So it was very much like the first, probably, I think episode 5 is whenever, between like episode 4 and 5 is when I was like, okay, I know what the plot is, I know where this is going, and I can really ramp it up. And it really ramps up from episode 5 and on, because I blew up somebody's head in episode 5, and then I did too much of ramping up, because then for like the next 4 episodes they were terrified of everybody. And I was like, what's the big deal? They're like, you blew up somebody's head. I went, well, they're an NPC. You guys can't have your head blown up your PCs. They're like, our characters do not know that.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
It's no fun if you approach the game that way necessarily.
And it worked out really well because I think, they were thinking, oh, we got this. We're beating everyone up. And then they run into like one actual scary villain and they're like, oops, never mind, never mind, never mind, never mind. Like we're way out of our depth. Like what are we doing this for? And that's also kind of like how I justified like a lot of people being like having their power stolen and stuff like that. That's also how I was like, oh, it is on y'all as teen superheroes because so many superheroes are just gone from this city.
I was interested about like the larger like social place for superheroes within the world because that wasn't immediately clear to me. You introduced like the daycare organization that's like
Yeah.
taking care of kids with superpowers,
Yeah,
but it
yeah.
wasn't really clear what that meant. Like, were they just arresting a bunch of kids?
Well, we're all very on the ACAB leftist side on our show. And so instead of just saying the cops are the bad guys, we were like, look, it's cops for kids and they're the bad guys. But that's what it was. That's what the commentary was, is like this police force that's supposedly like supposed to be enforcing the good. And obviously there's adults and stuff like that, but like it's one of those like, CW shows, you watch those, they're so focused on the main characters where I was just like, yeah, I just wanted it to be like a very 100% obvious, like, yes, the people that are helping kidnap, and also we didn't do this during the current time when ICE is abducting people, but it was just like, yes, the people that are the baddies are the cops. They're just arresting and hassling kids. I don't want there to be any question, um, and who the driving force behind this was. So that's kind of social commentary, is like that we're a very cut and dry ACAB show. Like, I don't think we weren't trying to be like, well, some of the police officers aren't corrupt. We're like, no, all of them are. Every single one is. And we were just, because that's a lot of like the comedy angle is like some of it very silly, drawn out gags, and a lot of stuff is just like just right in your face apparent.
I think that's part of like comedy is supposed to sometimes like shine a
Yeah.
light on bad practices, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So the intention was that they were like a really shitty police force because that was how they came across in the show.
Yeah, that's what, like, and like we never made other cops because also, like I said, we're not dealing with a lot of adult characters, so like it was just like, yeah. And also like what a wild thing to where you're calling the police force that focuses on like teens and kids daycare. And also I love acronyms and just coming up with as many dumb ones and superhero stuff. So like I just kept throwing those at them. And so like anytime I would say like a new group, they would be like, do I see dots in between the letters? And I'm like, yes, you do. And
Uh,
they would get so mad at me. But yeah, so it's just like a very, very face value making fun of that kind of stuff of like the authoritarian rule of the upper class.
yeah. So despite that, it's a very like lighthearted show. So like we're talking about like fascist cop organizations, but it felt like you even had like a torture scene that at one point that felt like it was done as a joke, kind of.
Oh, which one? Because that sounds like a lot of them.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, like I think it happened more than once, but
Yeah. I well, yeah. Here's the thing. We really want it. We want it to be fun. We want it to be silly, but I also just love comedy horror. I think they go together so well. Referencing back to my friend Branson Reese, who was like the GM for a lot of Root Tales of Magic. We had talked once about like people that think that you have to go like all drama, all horror. You can't relent. I'm like, no, you let people do laughs and you let people get relaxed and feel like comfy and safe, and then you terrify them because they're even more like susceptible to it. And so we wanted to have that angle, but also, at the end of the day, with the things we're talking about of like, the atrocities of police force, the atrocities of like the ruling 1% and how they're just like wealth hoarding and taking all the resources. That's kind of like the idea of being like, oh, they're stealing superpowers to redistribute to other people that just want them. So it's just like a very one-to-one allegory. The only thing we can do on our is love and support each other and have community. That's it. Like there's obviously other things we can do, but on the base level, Like, if you're not out there protesting, if you're not a lawmaker, if you're not trying to do these things and you're like, how can I do anything? Just be nice to people and help your friends out. Like, be there for them. And that's really the core message of the show, is the power of friendship. That's why so much of it was just like, them going up against these horrible things, and they always find a plucky, fun way to do it. Because at the end of the day, the message is always the power of friendship wins over fascism. Because that's what fascists want, is they want you to feel isolated and separated. And so allowing this decade plus long plan to be disrupted by three little assholes because they just won't stop and just love hanging out with each other and learning things about themselves and each other, is such a powerful message. And I think that's a good message in a lot of like younger media. And that's why I think YA stuff, despite it being called young adult, people of all ages love it, because it's such a enriching thing to like see and hear. Because and then as far as like the juxtaposition of like these super corrupt, evil, terrible people, making them dumb. I don't want to make it seem like these literal dumb people that are evil and doing the worst things in the world have any intelligence. And if they do, it's so flawed and skewed because they just want everything for themselves. Because that's what it really is. Like, everyone in this current administration, in my opinion, they're dumb. Are they doing horrible things? Yes. Are they good at it? No, but they don't care because they have a lot of money and they're just going to keep going until somebody stops them. And that's why you got to kind of look at it like, it is a lighthearted show at its core, because you got to be, and you got to have brevity in these situations, and you got to have people to lean on. I struggle with so many things like ADHD, addiction issues, depression, and I really, I have really hard days. I've been in and out of an NA program where I'm just trying to get a handle on my own addiction problems, and so much of it is based around having a core group of friends that love me and care about me. And so I think Critical Bits itself is a way that I was handling the fact that I didn't have a good enough childhood that I wanted as the producer. Like, legitimately, that's what the story's about. It's about wishing that I was able to fight like they did, wishing I had the backing to do it, and wishing that I could see change in the world through my actions. And so that's kind of why it was really lighthearted at its core, and had a lot of really dark and serious stuff, but treated comically, because my child brain couldn't handle things, so it just made jokes about everything. And so that's why, like, there's I think one of the first things that you might be talking about is like, we have an ex daycare officer who, through also the great thing about, like, roles dictating the story, like, one of them tried to befriend him and they did, and and then he starts to have this whole like terrible dissociation thing of like, wait a minute, I'm a cop that beats up kids, what am I doing? And so I think it's like episode 10 where this like ex daycare officer is in like one of their houses and is trying to commit suicide, but there's no bullets in the gun because they took them out. And it's like one of the most heartbreaking yet slapstick scenes in like the early days of the show. But I mean, that's what it is. It's like, that's kind of like, how I viewed the world in those young ages, of just like so lost in a fog of everything. But everything, the only way I found to get through it is just by laughing and trying to just stick together with people that had my back.
Yeah, I think that's a great message and guiding principle for the show as well. And I did see that kind of stuff in what you were doing.
Yeah, and I think I'm really proud of the show because we had a lot of people. I had no internet fan basis whatsoever. All this stuff I had been doing for years was very local comedy in my hometown Chattanooga or here in Atlanta. Didn't really have a lot of followers online, and I miss old school Twitter. I'll never refer to it as X, but like, you could get really good organic reach to both fans and other creators. But we had people like reach out, and like I mentioned, like Alex's character. At one point, like, she goes by the superhero name of Ace, and I was like, oh, are you making your character asexual? And she goes, oh, yeah, that is what the term is. And she thought about it, she goes, yeah. And it wasn't like a huge plot point, but it was just her being like, oh, I'm good, I'm asexual, and just stuff like that. And then we had like at least 2 fans throughout the run of the show, if not more, be like, yeah, I didn't know what asexual was, and I looked it up, and I was like, oh, damn, that's me. And so it's just so cool. We did an episode later on where it was like kind of a therapy episode for one of for the character Alex, because she's freaking out, and I didn't want to like therapize, but I was just heard like, remember the tools, remember this. It's just stuff I'd heard in therapy, and we had a therapist actually reach out. They're like the most honest representation of like what a therapy session is. You didn't fix them. You were like, remember, you have the power to control what you're thinking and what you're giving time to, and it was just trying to be as authentic in those really raw moments as we could. That I think really makes the show, and that's once again going back to the character thing I said earlier. Like, you're seeing these characters do really cool fights and have badass scenes, and you're also seeing them break down because deep down they're sad and scared and they don't know what the fuck they're doing. And then you get to see that resilience build up after that moment. And so I think that's really what resonates with the show, is it is like a real coming of age story for these three characters. And by the time we get to the end of it, like, they're not all fixed, but they're ready to like actually start a life outside of themselves.
Yeah, yeah. That's part of what coming of age stories are in a lot of ways. So that's cool. So later on, you had like a few different guests on the show. What was the process for that?
Yeah, I always love the idea of having guests on. So generally what we would kind of do is just if we had friends that we wanted to come on, or had like a fun idea for a character, and I thought, I was like, oh, I know someone who could play this really well, I would just be like, hey, do you have an idea of what you want to do, or something like that. Like our first guest was Ian Aber, a friend in town who's a huge comic book nerd. So I was like, oh, this is right up your alley. What do you want to do? And his episode was like Game Room. He wanted to do like, I believe it was Arcade is the Marvel villain, where he just puts them through all this dumb stuff. And so I was like, great, what do you want to do? Let's do that. Our second guest was Jack Packard, who is an amazing. He has his own show too, the Adventures he became a fan of the show. He was friends with Shannon, and he was, oh man, I'd love to be on the show. And I was like, what do you want to do? And he was like, I want to play like this super old, really shitty, like good assassin, but shitty at everything else. Like, I'm terrible at life, but I just murder. And we're like, great. And so a lot of that is just kind of like reaching out to people that we like. And I either sometimes had an idea of like, hey, this is the plot point I'm trying to convey with your character. How do you resonate with that? Or what's something fun and silly you want to do? And it kind of evolved from there to where, we would just find people I really liked because I met them through listening to other shows or playing games with them online and being like, oh, you're great. We have a superhero show. What do you want to do? Do you want to be a hero? Do you want to be a villain? Do you want to be in between? And then the fourth arc of the show, we had a couple of guests that I wanted to do, but I was like, oh, I can't do back-to-back guests. I went, wait a minute, maybe I can't. So we literally just did, I think it's like 6 episodes in a row where it's like a different guest each time, which was super fun. Like Branson Reese came on. We had Mark Meir, who's the voice of Commander Shepard, come on. Maggie Mae Fish, who's like a huge video essayist. Just all friends of like that we made throughout the first year of the show that we then had to come on. But I think it's really fun to let guests come on. Brandon Leon Gambetta, who played Jodo 1, which is our like spinoff of a Doctor Who kind of character, where the character always, if it dies, because it's the newborn playbook from one of the expansions, where it has a thing where it can die and reform as like a new character. And I was like, oh, that's so fun. What if we did that, but like every single time it came back, it was a new guest. Brandon Leon Gambetta, who made Passions de los Passions, had a Protean City show using masks as well. He came on to play Jodo at first, and he just like immediately jumped the gun, was going hard, and I loved it. And he told me, I feel bad because I'm accrediting this quote to him. He told me who the quote was actually from. I don't remember. So ask Brandon Leon Gambetta who this is actually from. But he says, when you're playing a guest character on a show, you got to drive it like it's a stolen car. You're not going to have it in the morning. You don't care what happens to it. Maybe it blows up, maybe it doesn't. But you got to go, 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 go. Which is kind of how I started to let guest characters run the show. I really just like, hey, what do you want to do? Sometimes I would give them playbooks. Sometimes I would give them like, stats to roll. Other times I'll be like, just say what you want to do. I'll tell you a number to add to a roll. We're going to get to what we need to get to. And I think it just really, it's it's a fun mix up for the listener. It's a fun exercise for me as a GM to just kind of let somebody else be really guiding the story for one episode. And that's kind of how we went from there. And we've changed it up a bit in Oddity Roadshow, where we have sometimes if a guest comes on throughout an actual arc, I'm like, these are the plot points we're trying to hit. And then in between each arc, we have what we call is a guest interlude episode where I just find people that I like. I'm like, hey, what's a silly idea you want to do? Great. That's going to be a standalone one shot, still connected to the overall world, but like they always just run into some weirdo in between arcs. But I think I just really love working with other people like that. It allows us to like expand who we've worked with, and a lot of them will remote in, and over the last couple of years I've been finding a lot more collaborators in Atlanta to play in person, which I think is just such a unique thing, and also kind of allows me to, oh, I really like this person, I wonder how they would do in a long-term campaign, let's let them come as a guest, and then I'll cast people in like a mini series or something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's a really cool idea, even not as like a guest, but like having players come in that are kind of playing a temporary character. So you could have like a larger group where you like have someone's like, here, let's have your normal character go off on an adventure for a little bit that, like makes sense in the narrative. You don't want to force it on people.
Yeah.
And then you can play like the parole officer for, Andy's character.
Yeah, and we play with that a little bit too, because some of the characters, a few people came back a couple of times. Like Jack Packard's character, the Sentinel, he was actually in 3 episodes because I didn't plan for that, but it just kind of worked out. But some characters, what we would do for guest characters, whenever they actually became friends afterwards, I would hit up the person, like, hey, obviously, you can't be, at all the recordings. If I need to record, if they call your character, can I record lines for you and send them to you so I can put them in post? And so everyone that we asked to do that was totally fine with it. So there was
cool.
one, yeah, there was like one character, played by a fan of the show, Troy. He came in and like was like a super smart character and was trying to be an adversary, but they ended up like being won over by the group. So they would call his character all the time for like advice and tech things, and so I would do that. So it was really fun too, because then you get to have these characters, like saying, like with the expanded world of the show, of like, oh yeah, they're still in it, they're still involved, they're kind of in the background, and we're gonna play with that a little differently in the next campaign we do too, of casting some people with the intended role of reoccurring NPCs that come in and out of the game, and not just like, we'll see if you come in. But yeah, it really does just broaden the world, and it's just so fun, especially in like one's a superhero world, and then Monster of the Week is like supernatural, magic is real. So you can really just let people go off on like whatever weird thing you want to do. We can make up a reason why it happened.
Do you feel like for the like having that be more of a intended thing means that you're planning out more of the plot ahead of time?
Not really. I think it's still kind of in my same vein of I like to make what I call pillars, plot pillars, where I have them. I know that they're very needed for the structure of the show. I don't know where they go and when they go. I just have them ready, and whenever I see, oh, this is a way to slowly tie it to that and slowly tie it to this, and so I think with adding in like, we're planning on having some characters coming in and out. It just gives me more stuff to play with, and it gives me more options to do, to where I'm like, oh, this would actually be a really good time to bring back Jeff as that character, or I can like segue this in. And it's also just, this will be my third, well, technically fourth, because we have another show, very, very like the loosest show I've ever run, the Science Adventures, the SS Bad Ship. But this will be like the third like very thought out campaign that I've done for an audience. And I always try to mix it up, like do styles of storytelling, what we're talking about, the themes and the tone, because I have so much ADHD. I hate doing the same thing twice. And I want people to be like, oh, I loved Critical Bits. Oddity Roadshow is a completely different show. It still has some of the stuff I love in it, but like I am listening to a different show made by the same people. instead of just being like, oh yeah, we're carbon copying every single thing. It's the same archetypes. It's the same characters. So I think it just gives me more to play around with and allows me to do a lot more extended world building, which is fun.
Yeah, like people pretend they want the same thing, but if they actually get it, it ends up feeling very stagnant and boring. So yeah,
Yeah.
you do need to change it up. There's something I wanted to ask you about the place for superpowers within the universe you're creating,
hmm
because like it didn't seem like it was very clear initially because all the kids are trying to hide it because of daycare and like all the bad stuff they're doing, but the larger superheroes, like it comes in later on that they're also losing their powers, so it's sort of like this almost like a commodity that people are treating it like. Is
Yeah.
that
Yeah. Well, I'll say the first part, the first part of the question, I did think we were going to be doing a high school. Ooh, we got to hide who we are, hide our powers thing. So that's kind of why that was originally there, and that kind of thrown out because they weren't going to high school. They constantly were just saying who they were to everybody. And so like I had to kind of readjust because I wanted there to be some like punishments for like, oh, your identity is open and now your family's that. When they were just like so blatant about it, where I was like, I mean, this would be literally like taking candy from babies if I do this. So I gotta reassess that. But yeah, I did want to treat it kind of like as a commodity because, like I said, it is the ruling class stealing stuff from the work from like the lower working class, and so that is kind of like it's like the idea of like exploiting labor, trying to take something that's not yours and becoming rich off of it, and like ultimately using what are natural talents and gifts for a greater evil that you have no say over. So we definitely played it like that with the first two seasons, like season 1 and season 2 focus on like the same storyline, and then season 3 is longer than both those together, and we just kind of made it like its own thing. But yeah, that's definitely like we want it to be like it was a commodity because you tell people, hey, we want you to use your powers for evil. They say no. They go, cool, boom, we stole your powers. You're in a coma. Like you can't fight us. So it's really just it's supposed to feel oppressive and it's supposed to feel hopeless that like there's nothing you can do, and even the people that have tried to fight back lost. And then that's kind of where we get into this next generation can do it because the people that are causing these atrocities have become so dumb and lazy and thinking nobody can beat them that's where their flaws are, as like we can now see the cracks in their armor because they just think that nobody can do anything, and they're not thinking that the youth have any intelligence or of use, so they're just kind of overestimating or underestimating them. So we definitely wanted to make it where powers were a commodity to be stolen and taken, and that's a scary thing because a lot of these people in superhero genres, their personhood and identity is so connected to their powers themselves. So it's just like a really easy way to play with that allegory.
So it also sets up this implication that the future could be one where powers are sort of like optional. Like if you don't want them, you can sell them.
Yeah. I think we never really went to that route. I like the idea because a lot of the things we played with too are superpowers are terrifying. Because in the first like 15 episodes, there's a lot of stuff about people's superpowers going awry and getting too strong where they can't control them. And like I believe it was episode 4 where it was like a batch of whatever gets out, and so people's superpowers are starting to go haywire, so that way the daycare could pretty much be like, oh well, we got to go arrest these kids because they're bad and they're doing all this stuff. But it was just showing, so all I thought of was like, cool, if you could phase in and out of stuff, what's something bad could happen? Your lungs form when the rest of you are not, and so you have dirt in your lungs. There's which ended up becoming the boy labyrinth. There was like a kid with stretchy powers who couldn't stop, and so like he was enveloping like his whole house of just him stretching ever and never ending. So it's also kind of the idea of So it's not just so much like powers for power's sakes, but it's like the idea of like you don't like growing up and being a teenager and a preteen is awful because you don't know who you are, you don't know what you like and what you do, and you're scared of yourself. And so I think that's kind of how I viewed powers was like your powers are tied to your personality and you don't know what your personality is supposed to be, and there's certain things you might want to do that society says no, there's certain things you might want to do that your parents say no. So I really was trying to use that as showing, you know, figuring out who you are is dangerous and hard. You do a lot of stupid stuff to try to figure out who you are, and sometimes you do a lot of really good stuff. But that's kind of where I was thinking about it more so. And I do think, I like what you're saying of the idea of like you could look at that where later in the future it could be a world where powers can be given and taken freely, where it's like, oh, I want this, let me get that. Because I love that allegory of you can allow yourself to be who you feel like on the inside more on the outside with certain things. We like Shannon Strucci is non-binary. We have a lot of trans fans. I'm experienced. I'm playing with like early stages of gender fluidity in my life, and I think that kind of is a lovely message of that. Yes, you can choose to change things about yourself that you were born with or that you used to do. Like a real world instances, I used to never really care about fashion, and then over COVID, I got really into actually dressing how I want to dress and being more experimental. And it's some of my friends that I've known for years, they're like, why are you doing this? This is weird. You had 5 t-shirts before. And then other people see me as like who I want to be seen as. So I think that's kind of what we're playing with more than powers for power's sake. It's like the identity that you're seeing within yourself and how it's scary to come to terms with that and figure out who that person is. And sometimes it can be hard. And especially for me, like I said, I have ADHD. I wasn't diagnosed until I was in my late 30s. So I just was so confused why sometimes I feel every feeling in the world and sometimes I have to sleep for 12 hours. And so it was a really hard thing to cope with without any help from that. And that also kind of goes into a lot of the older heroes are gone because I didn't have good parents growing up, so I had no role models. So I wanted to make a world where it's like, no, you guys are all figuring this out for yourself. You're not getting helped from the older generation because they're gone.
I was gonna make a joke about coming of age, like secondary there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. It's cool. And it's always good to like be able to bring in your own personal experiences to make the story and the game more personal.
Mm-hmm.
Well, maybe I shouldn't say always, but if you can do it without it being like a bad experience.
Well, I mean that's what I think storytelling and writing is. Werner Herzog, I read this article by him years ago. It was like right before I moved to Atlanta, and I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do. I really wanted to move, but I didn't have enough money, and I didn't have any like a job lined up. And this article, I'm paraphrasing a lot of it because it's been like over 11 years. He was talking about like if you want to get into film, don't go be a PA. Like PA is going to teach you how to suck up to annoying higher ups and make coffee and work awful hours and think that it's okay to only get paid $100 for that. He was like, go be a busboy, go work go do anything. He's like, because writing and directing and storytelling is about life experiences. If all you're doing is ingratiating yourself into a culture that's about filmmaking or storytelling, you're not learning how to tell stories. And so that's kind of what really resonated with me is, and I did stand up for years too. There would be plenty of times that I'd be like, oh, I got to get up every night. I got to work out these jokes. I got to do that. And I would kind of hit a wall being like, why? I don't like these jokes anymore. I can't think of anything funny. And it's like, oh, I haven't done anything outside of work and stand up for like 2 months. So I have no new jokes to write because I've not done anything new. And so I think that's a big part of like what makes stories unique based on the people telling them, because you get to bring your own instances in them. And also a lot of times you might not know that you are telling these stories because you're unhashing things. I had a couple of times where I was like, no, this is just a normal superhero plot. And then I'm like, oh no, it's because I hate my parents and I'm doing this. And and that's also what's so fun about creativity is like your brain's working on so many levels you're not aware of. And sometimes you are putting trauma work into actual stuff. And that's also why I think a lot of people resonate with our show, because I put myself a lot of like me personally in this, and then Shannon, Paul, and Shelby, they all did the mistake of a lot of people's first character on a show like this. They made versions of themselves like 2 degrees removed. Like a lot of their stuff is what they were like as kids and teenagers. And so then there's times with like, why was that session so hard? And you're like, oh, I that's because I made it me. And same thing with our new show. Paul and Shannon, who continued on, they made different characters to not play the same tropes. And then my friend Allison, who came on, I was like, "Hey, heads up, you're probably going to make a young version of yourself." And she's like, "No, I won't," because she's acted for years. And then she made a young version of herself, which is great. I mean, it's a really fun way to get through it. But I think it really does like help make the shows seem authentic, especially in my worlds, which are so over the top and so slapstick and so ridiculous, where there still is this core of authenticity because it's grounded in a lot of like pain and healing and trauma and informed childhoods and wishes. That really rings true, and that's in all of my projects. Though I'm very much like big into dark comedy, where I go very hard on the horror and the comedy, but also I'm ready to just like complete 180 off of that and then go to a healing moment.
Well, I think beyond just like inserting yourself, like everyone's been a teenager, so like that, you know, everyone can empathize with that experience that you're presenting for
Yeah.
those parts of the story, like being a teenager and having conflict with your parents and stepping into not the power of, you know, like someone who can control metal with their mind, but someone who can be an adult.
Yeah. Well, I also too, because I think that's why superhero stuff is so interesting, because it's like I kind of touched on this, like seeing these people that have like some of them next to God-like powers, or some of them just like a cool superpower. Like it's so interesting to see them and still have flaws, and it kind of makes it easier for some people to process that like everybody has stuff they're dealing with, because even these people that can move mountains and like blow up stuff or read people's minds still are struggling. And you know, especially for like younger folks, you know, I daydreamed all the time. I had all these like crazy fantasies of like, oh well, if I could just do this, do this, do this, and it was just like me wishing a better life for myself, but I couldn't imagine it on a mundane level, so it had to be a grandiose fantasy. Like I wish I was one of my Dungeons and Dragons characters. I wish I was in one of these comic books that I'm reading. And it's just because I wasn't happy as a child, and so you know, very sad to think about. But I couldn't comprehend that all it was instead of being like, I wish I was Spider-Man, being like, no, I wish my mom was nice to me. But I couldn't do that as a kid. So I just be like, no, I want to be Spider-Man. That's my problem, is I'm not Spider-Man.
Of course.
Yeah. But I saw that problem today that I'm not Spider-Man. I'll stand by that.
Oh, is his mom nice to him?
No, I think his parents are dead. I just want superpowers.
His aunt is nice to him.
His aunt, yeah, we don't get a lot of Peter Parker's parents in different storylines.
Yeah, and they're always fake when they show up.
Yeah.
One of the storytelling devices you used in the show was like time skips at certain points.
Yeah.
What was the structure for that?
An unintended thing that we started doing was, you know, so stuff was so heavy and they're in these certain situations, and then I'd realize like, oh, we've done like 5 episodes. It's 2 hours of in-game time of the world that's been happening, kind of thing, which is like happens a lot in like a lot of like superhero stuff and like anime things. And so every once in a while, I would just be like, okay, it's been a week. So instead of, you know, letting me pile on top of making everything worse and worse and worse, you guys tell me what you did, tell me what you got up to, so we can kind of get to a new start place. And then from season 1 to season 2, I did like a month time skip, because I wanted to use that narrative to be able to show that something with one of the characters was happening behind the scenes, that the other characters would slowly be seen throughout the first arc of season 2, and then be explained, oh, this is what happened, and then we go back and show it. So that one was like a very storytelling wise choice of, oh, hey, each of you did your own stuff. You won your first big battle. Tell me about some of the fun things you've gotten up to. And it also, I think, just kind of lets players have I like to give players full narrative control over those times. I've been like, hey, we're skipping a week ahead. What happened with you? And you don't have to, say that you lost a battle. You don't have to say you won anything. It could be nothing. Where it's just like, what do you think would be cool for your character to have happened? And I think it was kind of easier to do that at certain times. And then other times we did use it playing with a little bit of the narrative. And then there was definitely in between season 2 and season 3, we did a larger time jump. I think of probably 2 or 3 months, but that was because the finale of season 2 wrapped up not every storyline in the show, obviously, because we kept going, but wrapped up a lot of the big hard stuff, and so all of them needed a break, and so it was let's do that. And then that was also rough. I think, me personally, I think the weakest episodes are the first couple of season 3, and that's because we were going to do a soft reset and go into a bigger, larger superhero world. And the first time we started the show, so easy to just riff and flow off the things. So I had a couple of pillars in place, but we were still recording remotely then. So A, we didn't have the in-person riffing going off of each other. B, we all thought we were going to die in real life. We didn't know what was happening in the world. We're all stuck inside. We're so burnt out and depressed and every day that I was like, oh, this isn't clicking as good. Oh, it's because the real life is so terrible right now, which is also going back to when we said we burnt so much of the backlog, because I wanted to get back to that. And I can't remember the episode number, but the title is Raccoon Hands. That's the first one we get back in person for. And oh boy, we're riffing silly and crazy the entire time. And the show started to feel natural again, started to feel really good. So part of it was narrative choices, storytelling choices. And then other was just kind of hey, let them kind of drive the bus for a little bit. Tell me what they did. Because I was just a relentless GM, and anytime they would be in a situation, I'm like, okay, well, it gets worse. It gets worse. It gets worse. So it was stopping myself from allowing the story to get worse for them and being like, hey, here's your moment of rest. What did you do?
Okay. So it didn't have as much pre-planned nature to it. It's more oh, we need a little bit of a story beat break, so we're gonna put one here.
Yeah, it's kind of there's a lot more of just me kind of feeling it out as I went.
I also felt your campaign went on longer than a lot of other Powered by the Apocalypse actual plays that I've listened to, because you had almost 100 episodes.
Yeah, we definitely. I knew I wanted because I mentioned the friendship pegs, which kind of are Infinity Stones. I knew my plan was once they solve the problem, the first big bad, that they're going to see the real thing is these pegs and how they're connected to the overall world. And I knew I wanted to just do stuff with other dimensions of planes of reality with their powers being connected to it. So I knew I wanted to do all that. And so I knew I wanted the campaign to go past the first big bad, but I didn't really know where all that was going to go. And a lot of the length of season 3 was just setting up a soft reset, having to kind of figure out where we were going, what we were doing. The world's a lot larger. I wanted to show different aspects of different planes of existence. And then I'm trying to remember at what point, because I always knew that the show had to wrap up, but the second to last arc was another guest heavy arc. Because it was hey, who haven't we had on that we wanted as a guest, and who do we have a guest that we have to finish up their storyline? Because we got to do all that. So the last 20, that probably 8 episode arc is just cool. We got to wrap up these plot lines. We got to get everything in place to do the finale.
I did notice it was more guest heavy near the end.
Well, because we were hey, we got to wrap it up, and I realized we had a bunch of strings at the end, or people we wanted to get on, the mayor Jonah Jackson is based off of a real man named Jonah Jackson, who I met on Twitter, and is a hilarious actor and voice actor and improver. We're shit, we never got Jonah on as the actual mayor, and so we had him come on, so that was a lot of let's wrap these things up, let's do that. I like where the show ended. I like what we did. I've learned from that. We have a lot more cohesive ending for Oddity Roadshow that we're going to be doing, because I was, aware that plot points need to get wrapped up a lot sooner than right before the end of the show. And so, I think it's just like a little bit of the growing pains for that of just learning where we went. And we did do a lot of playbook switching. Another thing that apparently against the rules, you're not supposed to switch playbooks more than once as a character. I don't give a shit.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I think rules are made to be broken, and especially for like a narrative show. But we, um, I was also thinking about other superhero stuff that goes on a long time past the original premise, like comic book runs, TV shows, movies, where they're like, hey, your goal was to kill the guy that killed your uncle. You did that. And now you're immersed in a much deeper, larger world. So you have other problems to deal with. So we never planned on it going almost 100 episodes. But that's just kind of how it happened. We're probably going to be wrapping up Oddity Roadshow around 80 or so episodes. Still a lot, but considerably less.
Yeah. Well, we kind of skipped talking about the actual setting of Heavendale. So it's it felt like your intentions with it was like this is sort of any town, so it's a stand-in for whoever's listening, their hometown kind of.
Yeah, very much like I grew up in a smaller suburb of a small city, Chattanooga, Tennessee, and then spent a lot of my late teens and early 20s in the downtown area, and then all of us are from Atlanta. So I definitely want it to be like an anytown thing. I want it to feel very cheesy and campy. That's where the name Heavendale came from. Also the idea of like Heavendale, and then you cut to and there's like children police force out there like beating up kids and people stealing powers. So just the very like, oh, look at this place. It's supposed to be idyllic. It's supposed to be the best place to live. It's truly terrible. And really leaned into the slapstickness of it. In the first episode, we make them go to Sonic, because I used to go to Sonic as a kid when I had nothing better to do. And then the joke was made like, oh well, there's like the fascist Sonic on the other side of town, and they were like, yeah, like fascists on one side, other people on the other, and just like very much lean into those jokes. And then Paul Byron particularly. Episode 2 is called Wet Pins because I was always told them like, hey, I'll let you guys help build the world. And so I was like, hey, it's like Friday or Saturday night. Where are y'all going as teens? I thought Paul said a bowling alley and a pool. He said a bowling alley or a pool. But due to that mishearing, I was like, "Oh, that's disgusting." I was like, "Are you like swimming and then playing ball?" I was like, "I hate this," but we're gonna go with it. And so we named it Wet Pins. And then after that, Paul, who was just a master of puns, it was a lot of him, some of me, and then some other people. But like, just we started making terrible hybrid restaurants and places to go because it was just one of those like, it just really fit the tone of like this place is so it's like because it's also kind of the idea of like Gotham is so comedically criminal in the Batman world where it's
Right.
like, why are people still living there? Like, there's 30 supervillains mugging you every day, and you're still just going about your business. What's up with this? Like, Metropolis is beautiful, but also like the buildings fall over today. Why are you doing this? So we really wanted to play with that in our own silly way. So yeah, just the idea of that like Heavendale is its own weird ecosystem, but also like you're saying, like the Anytown. Atlanta gets a lot of fun bad raps of where you tell people shit that happens in Atlanta. They're like, that makes no sense. And we're like, it's just an Atlanta thing. And I think a lot of cities have that where there's these
Yeah,
weird
definitely.
this weird shit that you just kind of accept and you grew up around, and if you're not from there, you question, but if you're from there or live there long enough, you're like, yeah, that happens. And so that's kind of like where we were playing with it at. Just the idea of, like you're saying, really any town, and just like why do people want to stay here? What is the point of this place? And just really campy and cheesy. And it just really allowed the show to evolve in such like a slapstick. Like we started referring to the show as a slapstick body horror superhero comedy is what like how we kind of saw the show.
Body horror.
Yeah. Yeah, so like all the weird stuff. See, here's the thing. I didn't know I was super into body horror, but all the weird stuff with like the powers going awry or super disgusting powers and things like that. Apparently, that's all within body horror. I didn't know this was a thing. I thought everyone
Yeah,
liked it.
okay, I guess I see that now.
I see that in the episode where all the powers are going wrong. Shannon says to me, "Joel, I didn't know you're that into body horror." I went, "Yeah," and then I went home and Googled what is body horror, and I went, "Oh, that's what I thought everyone liked this, like Cronenberg stuff, things like that, like weird horror things." Turns out they don't all love it. And so yeah, I got very known for coming up with like terrible superpowers and villains and stuff like that, like which I still love to this day. And I lean into the body horror a lot more in Oddity Roadshow since it is like a Monster of the Week campaign.
Yeah, no, I think that stuff is cool, and it's sort of easier to consume over audio compared to like a comic book format.
Oh yeah.
People can still enjoy it even if they're kind of grossed out by the imagery because they don't have to
Hmm.
see it. Um, you set up the conglomerate as a villain for the show, and wanted to talk more about like your design process for that organization.
Yeah, I just have a mistrust of authority, and so I think like I feel like I wanted to kind of play within the world of like, we got the Justice League, you got the Avengers, you got the X-Men. I'm not saying all of those are bad in those worlds, but I'm just like, if you're like consolidating all the greatest superpowers and doing all this stuff like that, and you're like fighting for what the state believes is the greater good, you're gonna be evil. And it kind of coincided a little bit with like I never read the Boys comic book, but the Boys show started to come out, and I was like, yeah, this is
Right.
what I kind of feel is hitting, is like they're gonna be good people out there fighting, but like if you got the strongest of everybody there, you're gonna eventually get a little too power crazy. There's no checks and balances. And also I just, it's the whole thing of like this is the next step of authoritarianism for them to fight against, because they fought against, a corrupt city with just negligence and stupidity, and these people literally trying to do these evil plots just to get revenge on something in their own personal life, so like damned everyone else. And so it just kind of made sense of like, oh yeah, like they're gonna go meet the conglomerate. They're excited because like these are like the people that we have posters of them on our walls. And it's kind of like how you think when I was younger, I'm like, well, all Democrats are great, all Republicans are terrible. And then now I'm like, oh, both are awful. Politicians are very corrupt. I know there's good people out there, but like, damn, how are you all voting for these things? And like, nah, I'm paying all this extra money. So it was kind of just playing with that of being like, hey, these are supposed to be the people in charge that are the good guys. Oops, yep, they're still very corrupt because they're just self-serving and assholes. So that's kind of where the conglomerate came from, where it's also like hard to attack them in public because you are going against like the cream of the crop. And so it's the same way now. Like, I've been to tons of rallies and protests. But if I told you what I think we should do with the ruling class and people that have seats of power that keep voting against the interests of the people, we couldn't put that on this podcast and I'll get on a list. And so that's why with that, where it's like, cool, they have a villain that they could just go attack outright, and then now it's like, cool, are you gonna? And also I love all this. I think DC's done a lot more the alt world storylines of like Dark Justice League, where it's
Yeah.
just like, yeah, like what do you do when Superman isn't just a goody two shoes, very nice man, alien person, and it's just like and it's terrifying. And so that's kind of what I wanted to play with that, of like it's going to be a lot harder to take them down because they have more resources, and the most powerful thing of all, they have great public image. And it's kind of how like I forget the guy who is like show running the Boys TV show, where like Homelander and Trump stuff is so 1-to-1, because like my god, it's terrifying to think of. And so that's what we're playing with the conglomerate. And I wanted to make my own, like making fun of the tropes of like old superhero stereotypes and really steal stuff like that. Like one character they hated because I was making fun of the idea of all proteges and Robins of like these weird children that are like, so we had one character called Boy Hunter. He was a feral
Uh-huh.
child, and he was a boy that was a hunter. But they're like, no, you can't say boy hunter. It sounds like he's hunting boys. I was like, no, he's a boy that's a hunter, and like would do shit like that all the time of just like making very obvious bad names that would imply one thing and be the other. So that's definitely what I was like trying to play with. And there was a storyline that I had set up, but we didn't go into, where I forget but they had like a Young Justice style team for the conglomerate that like a bunch of these younger superheroes are on, because I was like, oh, they can join them and try to turn people. They didn't go for it, which is fine. But yeah, it was just kind of like me playing with like, Justice League, Avengers, and stuff like that, and but also saying like, sadly, if we're basing this off of more real world things, these would get really corrupt without checks and balances.
Yeah, and it's very hard to have checks and balances against superheroes. Like that's kind of the point of the Civil War plotline from Marvel. And yeah, the was that the one where Superman becomes evil, the Justice Unlimited? I forget what that series is called.
Yeah,
in
and also,
DC.
I mean, it's also like look at it right now. Like we have checks and balances, and it's just these people are so rich that they're just like flooding everything with bad ideas and bad actors and bad things.
Well, it just relies on like the government actually using them.
Yeah, and so I mean that's the other thing. They've also gotten people into place, but it's like we had checks and balances. Well, then they filled all the people with the roles that do the checks and balances to not actually call them on things. And so that's kind of, once again, just using these storylines to really play out like what we see in everyday life. And once again, it's really hard to comprehend this, but it's a lot easier to take in media where we have it in this kind of removed setting of their superheroes. Oh, they're silly characters. Oh, they're idiots. And being like, yeah, but like you change two things. You have the last 10 years of politics.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
It is interesting how often it seems like that conservative people don't understand the allegories in the media that they're consuming.
I more than ever, media literacy and like story structure needs to be taught. So, because like just seeing the stuff that people are trying to pull, you should be able to be like, oh wait, this is like you guys are doing like a plot from like a book that I read as a kid. Like you guys are literally like or just like this is such a dumb thing, or you're obviously doing that. And it's also just really bummer as a creator because, like I mentioned earlier, movies and TVs are dying in awful ways, and big studios are like, if people have to think in the theater, the movie's a flop. Everything needs to be explained as soon as it's on screen. Everything needs to be your handhold, and you're not getting like great works of art where you're like, oh, I didn't understand what's happening until an hour in, and that's such a cool reveal, or like, oh, like the depths of this story and stuff like that. We're losing so much good, authentic voices because of it, and so that's it's such a bummer.
Or like stories like that are sometimes damaged by their presentation. Like I think Tenet had the capacity to be a movie like that, but because of the audio mixing, it was just too hard to actually consume it because you couldn't hear what people were saying.
Yeah, so I mean, it's all such it's just an interesting thing to be in any creative field, really, because it's so open-ended of what you can and can't do, how you interpret it, who likes what, and also, like I said, it boils down to like not everyone's going to like everything, and a lot of people are trying to make like, oh, I want evergreen content that the majority of everyone can like, and I'm like, okay, that's not good. Like, I'm not saying it's bad, but like you're going really cookie cutter. I like being in a weird little niche. Like this show's niche, my other stuff is niche. But the fans we get are very passionate, and I get to tell stories I really care about. And I couldn't do that, And don't get me wrong, if someone pays me a check, I'll sell out. If you want me to make a watered down version of my stuff, but like I have all of my bills paid and actually have savings and healthcare, I'm ready to do it. But no one's done it yet for a high enough price. So that's why I'm still going to tell weird little stories.
And I'm not even sure that type of like sellout is necessary to be successful. I think is what, like you mentioned, Dimension 20, but like the whole dropout, like media empire sort of. I'm not sure empire is quite the right word, but it's very like progressive and accepting, and it's not damaged by doing that.
And I don't think it is at all. And I think that's a really good case of, I mean, Sam Reich, the creator of it, or like one of the big backers, he's never shied away. He was lucky. He was born with money, and he just invested in people that he really liked their voices and thought. And there's a lot of things like that are still happening to this day, and thank God for them. It's hard to do, and like he's also really kept a good level head of, hey, like they did the campaign like last year being like, hey, we got to raise the price by $1 if you go ahead and subscribe now and keep your subscription. We're never going to raise it to you. We just want to do a couple more things, but it's just $1, which, it's cool of them because they're not trying to money grub. They pay higher than scale. And so I do think there's a lot of people out there that want to do things like that. Do those people have that lucky pairing of I want to do this and I have financial backing? Not always. But,
Yeah.
I think, Dropout is a great example of that. Other, indie labels and creators that are trying to help people, that's the stuff that I think a lot more people need to be looking out for. Is like when you're upset about mainstream media not being representative of you or like doing enough, stop going to $25 movie theater tickets that just don't care about you and they just want 5 generations to sit in the theater and turn their brain off. Like finding indie art is a little harder, but like there is great stuff out there that's groundbreaking, and those people, paying them $20 is going to change their life way more than studios. And it's hard to do. I still falter at that, but I think it's one of the biggest things of capitalism is it's crushing, and it makes you feel like there's no other way out. And there's still people, fighting and doing cool stuff. There's still like the metaphorical, roses growing in the middle of a concrete slab, or like daisies and stuff like that. Like stuff is still popping up, and you're never gonna really stamp it out. But that's just kind of like what you still got to do, and that's why I was saying, going back to the core of the show being lighthearted and about the power of friendship. I mean, it's all you can do in a terrible capitalistic society that values like worth over just basic necessities.
And comparing what we're talking about here to like the sort of Italian Renaissance, where like people had patrons and their stuff could be sort of subversive in what they were creating, but I feel like it was just a very different environment.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what exactly the differences are that make it so that we don't have really patrons like that anymore.
Well, yeah, because I think a lot of it, creative stuff and entertainment stuff is always kind of, you see you can make money off of it. But I think there was the value system that art is meant to be weird and experimental. Art is meant to not turn a profit, and that's I'm sure capitalism is like hit a lot of things, but like where everything has to make money right now, like look at the post office. Post office was never made to make money. It was made to connect everybody, and yeah, it loses money because it's a service that we need, and that's why we fund it with the government. But then like, oh well, it's not making money, so we gotta cancel it. Art isn't making money, but like letting weird little freaks sit in your pool house and write a play or make a painting or do stuff like that, so then you and your friends can go see it. That's the value of art, and that's what I can't as like missing in our society is that everything has to be commodified, and like how can you make money off of it, even if you're like, okay, well you make a couple of cool things, but like the profit margins are so slim, and you're now going to have to scale. You have to make something even bigger and better because like the problem with capitalism is like a snake eating its own tail, where you always have to grow and expand whenever you're just like, no, let me just make stuff on the same scale that's a little different. And they're like, no, your next one has to be huge, which, you see in like a lot of filmmakers where they're being pushed to do a lot of bigger stuff on a shorter timeline, and then their movies aren't as good, which, not necessarily a fault of them, but just like the thing we're in. And I've talked about that so much of like the Italian Renaissance. It's like, I wish somebody who just liked my fun little weird goofs and stories would be like, here's a house, here's your food, here's a little bit of spending cash, just go make stuff with your friends. Like have your little friends come over, and do your podcast, and then I'll go listen to them whenever I'm doing my job. Because I can't tell the stories you can, but also you can't hold it down a day job because you have more ADHD than the world.
Yeah. No, I think that's what you said there is exactly it. Like the making art into a commodity that has to sell is probably the main difference between like Renaissance patrons and the modern world where, art needs to turn a profit or it doesn't get produced. Like the Sistine Chapel, for example, like was not created to be like this tourist attraction that it is now. It was created to just be beautiful.
Yeah. And that's why a lot of this stuff that we do like really boils down to like fascism and capitalism being like the real ones. is a convention I go to every year here in Atlanta called Multiverse Con. I love it. So fun. I love paneling on it. And there was like one panel I did this year where it's called Eat the Rich, Capitalism and Horror. And I was like, before we get started, I want to say, if you gave me enough time, I could yarn map every single horror story to connect to capitalism because, like, really, like, the roots of it are so deep and so insidious. Like anything dealing with mental health capitalism, anything dealing with but that's what we're just kind of talking about. So, like, it's these allegorical stories of where we can talk about these day-to-day problems in an easier to digest world where really if we just realize that we made up money, because we did, and just we're making equitable systems to where, like, as long as that's why I think Star Trek hit so well, is the idea of, like, this utopic society where money's gone and you're just supposed to be doing stuff of value. So, like, if you want to do nothing and sleep all day, great. No one's really going to respect you. But, like, if you're like, hey, what I really like doing is, like, helping clean up, great, go clean up. What I really like doing is telling stories. I'm a good marketer, blah, blah, blah. Like, just letting people find out what they're actually good at and enjoy, and letting them do that, opposed to, hey, if what you're doing isn't making money, you should die. And then also, if you weren't born rich, you should also die. Is kind of the message of capitalism.
Or do some shitty job that realistically, yeah, a robot could do.
Yeah, and then it zaps all your energy. Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. Like, that's a whole other can of worms right there of just, like,
Yeah.
what all of it really boils down to, and like what you're fighting against.
Yeah, bringing it back to the show, do you feel like the characters defeat capitalism in the end?
No, they don't defeat capitalism in the end, but they do what I think is one of the only things you can really do in this current society. Because, like, I wish I could tell you that I believe I'll see the end of a lot of the stuff that's happening in my lifetime, but I don't think I'm going to. I think in the end, they find peace within a community they build within themselves. They find their tribes, they find their outlets, they find the things that they can control and do in a terrifying world and give back. Each of them, we kind of, like, talked about what they get into later in life, very different from what they do in the show, because they find, like, how they can have their peace and happiness and be giving back and not forcing themselves to be in the fight every single day. Because I think that's a big thing that a lot of people have to realize. Yes, sometimes you're going to be doing a lot of really good work. You're going to be reaching lives. Sometimes you can't do it for whatever reason. Did you get burnt out? Did you lose your money? Are you disabled? Are you immunocompromised? Do you have chronic health issues? Like, there's so many things that stop people from doing as much as they want to do. And all of them are valid except for whenever it's just like, oh, I'm going to take 80% of the profits of this because I invested 30 years ago and all of you are fighting for bread. So I think they all find peace within themselves, or at least enough peace to move forward in a life that doesn't feel like you have to keep fighting, which is something I still struggle with every day. Is like that I feel like every day for me is a fight within myself because I'm not good enough. I haven't done enough of this. I'm not working enough. I haven't made enough things. Haven't reached enough. And, I don't have that peace to kind of settle down and allow myself to move on to a next stage. And, that's why a lot of that is in my art, is the constant struggle and the everyday battle of, I hope one day I can get to a place where I can let myself stop, not die, not give up, but just stop this constant fight. And I think all of them find a place within themselves and what they've been able to do to allow other people to start taking up the fight.
Well, I think another part of that is just like, we want to have characters that are, more interesting and more powerful than ourselves in a lot of ways. So that's, if your end state for your character is the same or worse than yourself, it's kind of a depressing story.
One funny thing, because spoilers, none of them die. Paul, because I kept being like, hey guys, think about what you want your, like, long-term thing to be. And Paul just kept saying, I want Jerry to die. And then we were like, we can't do that. Like, we kill a couple of characters in the show and they come back superhero style. But I was like, you can't die. And then eventually I just sat him down. I was like, okay, we all want the characters to have their best ending. And he goes, yes, I want Alex's best ending is not Jerry dying because they're best friends. Jerry dies, Alex doesn't get her best ending. You can't kill your character because that won't give like Shelby's character. And he went, damn it. And but it's just such a funny thing of him being like, I don't see a good end. What if he dies? Because Paul's also he's fatalistic and has depression, and so to be like, hey, as a teenage version, what do you think the best ending? I was in the same boat. I didn't think I was gonna live past 30 because I was like, oh, I'm just gonna burn out and do some dumb shit. And it is, that's what I'm saying. It's a hard thing to like have an end with the future still attached to it because there's always gonna be more story to tell. There's something else happen in their life. And one of the things that I really like that we played with in the very end is like there is a final call to action in the last time jump, and they're like, oh, we're good. Like the next generation has it. Like, and it's a bunch of people that they inspired to become heroes themselves. So, I think that's like the best thing you can ask for is just like to have peace in your later life, to just be able to truly authentically live your life the way you want to and be surrounded by the people you want to be surrounded by.
Yeah. Well, this went significantly more philosophical than I was expecting for this episode.
Yeah. Sorry.
It's all good, man. Anything else you wanted to say about the show?
No, like I said, I really love it. It is funny because I can get really down and philosophical about it, but it is a very funny, very silly show. And I really love the themes of it because I do think we get to the core of a lot of issues without getting too deep in the mud. I think we get to tell a really cool story. And I just loved how it came out because I have done a lot of things throughout my career. I did not know that what I wanted my career to be was to be a producer of like actual playing comedy podcasts. I'm now sitting in my like actual studio that I have built around that, and like am trying to build up to the point of where I can help people produce shows and I can get budgets for people. My dream is a version of Dropout. Just like finding money, helping people that I know are very funny and have authentic voices to get out there. And it's such a unique thing to be able to do that, like I said, with the dynamic of group storytelling. I really think that actual plays are getting bigger for a reason and are going to continue in popularity because it's such genuine, unique stories. And I love Critical Bits. I don't think I'm ever going to revisit The World because I think we have a good ending.
Yeah.
And I think that that's what I want for all my projects is I want to feel like, hey, I told a good story. Did I tell all the stories? No, sir. Can I? Never. But like it's done, it's wrapped up, and I get to build on that and make new things and just connect with people. So check it out. It sounds like a lot of episodes, but like they move fast. I have so much ADHD. The episodes are not slow moving. Shit happens at all times because I get so anxious sitting still.
Yeah, they're very fast-paced episodes, and they're also only an hour each. So there's other episodes for some actual plays that are like 6 hours, and I feel like those are
the worst thing in the world. Yeah, I think some episodes might get close to 2 hours. Some guest episodes do run a little longer because we let them play a bit more. But yeah, like an hour to like an hour and a half is like the runtime of most of them, and like 15 minutes of those are usually me ranting at the end because we used to do like live show notes at the end of recordings opposed to recording them afterwards now.
I also usually ask if you have any advice for other DMs.
Find your play style that you feel most comfortable with. I talked about it a little bit earlier, like, you can watch stuff and try to emulate it, but like you just got to find out what works for you. Some people love heavy prep, some people don't. One shots are the best way to break in. Run a couple of one shots for your friends. Don't make yourself have to come up with a campaign right away. And then if you like GMing, because that's also the thing. Some people don't like it. Some people do it because they're the only ones willing to. It's okay to tell people, hey, I actually hate this. This isn't fun for me.
Yeah.
And then finding a system that fits your style of play, I think is a huge thing. Everyone wants to play D20 games, which is fine. And just don't be scared to change stuff up for yourself because everyone has a different style of running games and what they like and what they don't like. And then also, on both sides of this coin, you're a player at the table, so your enjoyment matters. But also, you need to make sure that the people you're playing with on mic or off air are also feeling like they have some say in the world. Because if you're just going to storyboard and railroad people to do exactly what you want, and if they don't do it, you punish them, go write a book, because that's what you want to do.
Right.
If you want to have collaborative storytelling, let people fuck up your world a little bit. Let people throw a wrench in your thing. And if it really screws you over, tell people. But I think like open communication is so huge in this thing. And then also making sure that you're still enjoying yourself. Because if people are like ruining your game to a point where you're not having fun running it, tell them. Say, hey, you guys really aren't doing how I thought it would be. I wanted some certain things to happen. Can we address this? Because you still need to make sure you're getting validated at the table and getting to have fun. And if they don't like it, end it. There's no wrong time to end a game. If a player needs it, if you need it, if the campaign isn't going where you want it to, you can just quit. It's great to do. I've had tables where like, hey, we tried it didn't work. I've had a couple of projects where I tried to record stuff with other people. It didn't hit after a couple episodes, so we scrapped it. This is fun, and make sure to have fun with it. And also do weird little gay stuff in all your games. Every game, get a little gayer every time.
I would say test your boundaries a little bit every time.
Yeah, there we go. I guess that's how you could put it too.
Yeah. No, I definitely agree with that. Some of my most fun campaigns are basically where I've broken everything in my campaign world, and it's like, okay, well, yeah, everything's ruined and different, but part of the fun for the players is having an impact on the world, and that only happens if they're able to, basically change everything that's present there.
Yeah, and I love times whenever my players have to make me think quick on my feet, and like change something, or they do something where I'm like, oh, I've been trying to figure out a way how to make like this one plot point I want to have work, and this is the perfect entryway, or stuff like that. Like it's very fun. And then like I said, I've had a couple railroading moments where I've told people, hey, this is just something that I'm gonna have happen. It's a set point. How we get to it is open-ended, but like this is what I want to have for the narrative. So I think it's a really open-ended thing. But once again, I played with DMs before where I'm like, just go write a book, because you don't want me at this table. You want me to read your book and say good job, and I'm not going to do that either. But you can go post it on Reddit.
Yeah. Well, yeah. You want to shout out your next project?
Oh yeah, like I said, so if you guys want to, we have Oddity Roadshow. It's still currently being released. Monster of the Week podcast. 3 friends traveling to the southeast in a spooky van, going town to town, like solving mysteries, but also kind of figuring out their placement in life. Like Critical Bits is definitely about like a teen story. This is about early 20s. The next show, which we'll be announcing more. Go follow us on everything at Do You Validate. That's our studio network. We're going to be using the Cypher system. It is set in a world of modern day, once again. And the basic premise is around 3 months ago, magic became real. The characters are going to be playing part of this institution that is researching and cataloging magic. And it's going to be kind of, we had our teens, our 20s, and this one's kind of like late 20s, early 30s of finding your place in the world and the communities around that really hold together things. That one's still very early in the works. We have it casted and everything. But just follow us on Do You Validate. That's where you can find everything. And thank you all so much for checking out our work. And thank you so much, Isaac, for having me on.
Yeah. Thank you for coming on the show, Joe.
That was Joel telling us about Critical Bits, the Masks superhero game that he played. Joel's doing a couple other cool things that he talked about there, so definitely check those out. His website is called doyouvalidate.com, where you can also search that online, and there's links in the description of the episode for all that stuff, so definitely check that out. To help support the show for setting the stage, you should join the Discord, and we're also having a contest for the Tabletop Community Spotlight, which will be going on. The contest goes until March 6th, so you've still got some time to submit a RPG idea related to necromancy. You can see the full rules on the Setting the Stage Discord or on the Tales from Elsewhere Discord servers. So definitely check that out, and we'll be streaming all the entries in March, and hope you can watch that stream too once we get to it. And as always, we thank our Patreons, and today that is Darren. Thank you, Darren. And thank you, everybody, for listening.